John, thanks so much for taking some time out here at FutureStack New York to chat. IBM, huge, and in the news with the Red Hat acquisition, just so many things moving. I know you're really focusing on, the IBM cloud, which is a huge opportunity for it. Maybe we start off and kind of share your role at IBM. And I think also you got a really interesting journey of how you got to IBM, if you wouldn't mind sharing.
Sure. So my journey begins as a meteorologist. I have always been a weather geek, and B, a computer geek. I was writing software when I was 6 years old on my Commodore 64. I took those same practices, though, into writing my weather software at Weather Underground. And we did a lot very quickly. We had a development team of 10 folks. And we could push out features. I mean, there'd be a severe thunderstorm outbreak, and I'd push out that feature on the radar that showed you which way the cells were going. So we had a very, very over-agile environment. We could do whatever we wanted. And in doing that, I learned really quickly how painful it can be when things go wrong, and how easy it is to make things go wrong. Those little minor pieces of code that you change that should have no effect on anything in the world can take everything out. So that's what I learned in my experience at Weather Underground. Then we got purchased by the Weather Channel, and then the Weather Channel, as the weather company, got purchased by IBM, and that's how I got this opportunity to take this experience that I had running the Weather Underground's website and applications and bring that experience into IBM Cloud and help the IBM Cloud transform its Cloud Console experience, which is, IBM Cloud is a network of 140 services. These services are anything from file storage to databases, and it's all managed services, which is what makes cloud really a fun environment, right? For a company to go into cloud, they all of a sudden have all these services to their disposal. But that is a huge availability challenge. All these services are what other companies are basing their operations on. So they can't say, sorry, our cloud-in database was out today, and that's why we weren't up. So it's not OK for IBM Cloud to have availability issues. So I had this opportunity to take those war stories I had at Weather Underground and bring them into our Center of Excellence at IBM. And this Center of Excellence, what it does is all those services I'm talking about, we monitor those services from a business standpoint. What types of DevOps methods do you use? What kind of security posture do you have? Are you following GDPR? And then what monitoring do you have? Can you see problems coming into your service in synthetics where you create requests that you think customers want? But do you also have APM, which is a really strong part of the New Relic platform, which is the ability to see customer experience as it's happening. So that's where I came in. This group at IBM Cloud, called the Center of Excellence, has pillars, and one of the pillars is monitoring, and that's where I help transform the monitoring of all IBM Cloud services to bring them all up to a standard where we can feel that they are absolutely IBM Cloud worthy.
Mm-hmm. So let's take it a step back, from IBM for a second. Is I think that challenge of teams, 145 services, and from a customer, and I think all of us, leaders out there, you might have microservices, or maybe it's full-on applications like you're talking about, but I think they all have that thing is there's this growing cascading dependencies of all these different things. And I think a lot of people, when agile transformation, again, not at IBM, but let's go back 5 or 6 years, a lot of people start saying, hey, we want to go agile, and agile just means everybody do everything. I know that that's not the case at IBM, but I think that challenge of how do I've got these 145 teams, and how do I get them on the same page with one view of the truth, and that visibility, that must be it's a huge challenge at any company, but at IBM, that must have been an extra huge challenge to kind of get that going.
Exactly. So the problem statement was actually the easier part to understand, which I think sometimes the problem statement is hard to understand. But in this case, the problem statement is, how do we get the availability we want? And then how do we create as single a pane of lens as you can have across so many teams with so many development organizations in so many different parts of the world? And that's where New Relic really brought it together. We were able to create one project called the Default Dashboards Project, where now IBM teams share dashboards, and they actually share them as code. So this not only does my team specify the constraints, or actually not, it's better to be said as the bar. What is the minimum bar of monitoring? What do you have to have in New Relic? But my team also creates the enablement to make it so that a small team with 3 developers on it doesn't spend 3 weeks on monitoring and get themselves to the point where, well, they have some synthetics, they have the APM configured. We want to be able to make it so that in that same amount of time, these teams can jump way past what they'd be able to do by themselves and leverage the fact that we have 140 teams. Instead of 140 teams being a challenge, we want 140 teams to be the leverage.
Right, it's leverage because they're all now working together, driving the experience together, and even the trust. I don't know if you've seen this, but in my previous role, what I would see is before New Relic, teams would have a different view of the truth, and they would say, hey, it's not my system, it is, and they'd be looking at different tools. Whereas in my previous role, then teams could easily access each other's dashboards if there was a consistency, and they kind of had confidence in each other's system, and that transparency at first might feel a little bit uncomfortable, but after that, wonderful things come together, and you really feel that team that you're talking about. And the power of IBM, 145 teams, that must be amazing.
It is, but you're right, it comes from the challenge, right? Because I think with monitoring, the beginning of the experience starts with the finger pointing, right? This idea of root cause, of I'm going to monitor my system, now I can see your system, now I'm going to be able to point my finger at you. And it evolves beyond that because you start to understand that we're all on the same team. Right? And if your service is having trouble, yes, my service is having trouble. But if we have similar monitoring and we can actually talk to each other about what we're doing, I can actually leverage my skill set and bring it over to this other team and help them.
Yeah, I think that visualization, the customer experience changes. Like I started off, I think you said you started off as a developer. So I started off as a developer. I wasn't cool enough to have a Commodore 64. I had the TRS-80 color computer, so I'm totally dating myself. But when I was leading software teams, a lot of times they would be given tasks. And so success was I shipped code, or I completed that part in Jira or whatever agile piece they were using. And when we started putting business dashboards, so when they had like a New Relic dashboard and they could see, hey, I released this feature, and they put business metrics where they could see, hey, is it moving the needle? It actually changed the culture of the team. I had one team, there's a small business, they say they probably did about $160 million a year. But when they had that visualization, they went from growing at market to twice market, and the engagement ratios in the developer teams themselves went through the charts. You guys seen some of that? I know I've talked to some of the teams at IBM where it's like it's a new day.
You know what my favorite one is the connection between performance and unique visitors or acquisitions. So the one thing that I learned very early was that you could have let's say your metric was how long does it take the page to be viewable, right? When you were talking a web application. And you'd get things like, well, within 7 seconds, the whole page is viewable. And I would say, as a naive developer, it's not so bad. When I'm visiting websites, it feels like that's pretty normal. It takes about 7 seconds for everything to kind of jiggle around. And I did not realize, and I saw it firsthand, you get that 7 seconds down to 2 seconds, and not only do your customers click on more pages, they stay longer, there's just more customers. And so it was so exciting for me to see through my journey that a change in performance has a business effect that's wild, and you just don't expect it. Everyone focuses on what does the product do. And I know we focus on how does it perform, but I think we need to really realize that if it's 100 milliseconds, get it down to 50. If it's 50, get it down to 25, because no matter what, when it runs faster, you will see a return on all those business KPIs you're talking about.
No, I think that's true, and I think that's what we had seen in my previous role is with New Relic, it's really almost like monitoring the customer experience, because they're really composed of you've got infrastructure, that's a piece. Your code, that's a piece. And then also how do people experience mobile browser, because sometimes it's network issues that have nothing to do with that, but getting that holistic view, and if you could throw some business metrics on, it's a huge thing to customers. Any other, I mean, again, so many things you do at IBM. Any other things, people that are trying to be transformational leaders? I think setting up a COE, and making IBM the incumbent be that incumbent disruptor, it sounds like a pretty interesting challenge, and I know you're making really good progress there. Is there anything you would share that people that maybe are in a role like yours, where they're trying to make a difference in a big company, some kind of lessons learned that you want to share?
Yes, the biggest one is I guess is getting out of first gear. The problem that often happens with a company is someone has a good idea, someone's come to the New Relic conference, they come back to IBM, and they've got this enlightened view of the world, and they're like, oh, we've got to be using New Relic, and everyone else goes, yeah, we're already monitoring everything, it's all mature, I don't want to put time. We want to put time into making new features, why should we put time into the monitoring? So I think one of the things that helped the most at IBM was running POCs. What does POC stand for? Give it to me right now.
Proof of concept.
Thank you. I love it. So running proof of concepts was the key to getting New Relic adoption at IBM. And it wasn't only a proof of concept with one team. If you're a large organization, you're likely to have multiple size teams. So my suggestion is running proof of concepts with different team sizes. Maybe take your smallest team template, and also teams that are just genuinely interested, right? Take a small team that's struggling, they're very green, have them try New Relic. Then take a large team that's not green and their leaves are turning brown, they've been around so long, right? So that team also needs to show how can they adopt it, because what you need is a proof that no matter what the team situation, there's an ability to adopt this platform. And I think at IBM, that was one of the challenges, because a lot of the teams say, we don't need it, we're already monitoring. And when in our Center of Excellence, they all come through my desk, so I learned the real truth, right? They come through and I have them fill out what I call the mature monitoring assessment, which I go through and I just ask them questions. If a user is getting 500 errors, will there be an alert? Is there a threshold to that alert? Do you have synthetics? Do you only have synthetics? Right. And when I ask those kinds of questions, it really is enlightening, and it's enlightening in both sides, and that's actually the magic of why that assessment works. So I would very much suggest that not only you run proof of concepts, but you also just ask the teams a set of questions about their monitoring so that they discover and you discover at the same time. Because the reality is everything works better when the team you're trying to lead discovers it by themselves.
That's right.
Right?
Those are huge points. So I think, I always look at transformation. If you want to be a transformational leader, it's people, process, technology. I look at it as New Relic as kind of a technology enabler for the transformation. And again, I think it's going back to, it's much more than monitoring. It's really that customer experience, because we had people that had used different point solutions. And when we put in New Relic, it wasn't just somebody that did monitoring. Suddenly the developers were doing it, the product managers. It really is, that whole team sport. And I think when people are first thinking about it, if they think about it as monitoring, they got to change their mindset. It's really the customer experience. And then the other part is to boil the ocean. Like, just pick a couple of places, do a POC, get a team that has credibility, right? You mentioned like a team that's maybe small and quote easy, and a team that like has a really hard problem where everybody respect if that problem solved for them, and then let them be the voice, because there's nothing better, even like our conversation right now, than somebody who's actually doing an experience the benefit to talk.
And the only thing I think that we're really missing when we're talking about customer experience is I don't think folks understand how powerful putting APM, I would not, in other words, if I'm writing code, I would not, at the point where it goes through what we call the car wash, where they're going from experimental to beta, they come through and I say, do you have APM? And they say, no. And I say, gosh, it's really amazing. You got to add it. That's the wrong time to add it. Sure, it's great to add it then. You're going to get a lot of benefit out of it. But when you're writing the code, that's when you add it. You add it as the first line in the node script, right? Because through the development process, if the team's looking at the APM output, they're not going to have to wait for the customer impacting event that says the latency is too high. They're going to see as they're working on it where the pain points are. And that means the developers will already be keyed in for when problems do occur, where all the kind of iffy parts of the code are, because they're profiling the code as they're developing it, which for me, it was always an afterthought. I profiled the code when it was broken. And I'd go, oh my gosh, I need to put something there, I need to put something there. But the magic of APM is you don't need to put something anywhere, right? It just magically knows about most of the things you care about. And then when you're doing something different, or you rolled your own database 1000 or something, then of course, then you add the little custom instrumentation around that. And that's what's awesome about the APM software libraries too, is that you can just add your own metrics.
I agree. We already both dated ourselves, me with the TRS-80 color computer, you with the Commodore 64, but it's night and day, because when we wrote code a long time ago, how many times did we waste hours of our life figuring out what that one little thing is? And when you install APM and you click a button, it says it's line 32 of the code, and that's what the issue is. It's a differentiator. And once somebody's experienced that, then they're probably, I'm all in with APM.
Oh, it's like the moment you discovered that you don't have to use printf to find the problem, but you can actually just type where in GDB, right? When I learned that when I was coding in C, it was like, I was like, oh my gosh, the whole stack, like how the person got here, I can see. Yeah. And APM is just that for an abstraction at many levels higher, and now you have this abstraction. And with distributed tracing, you not only have that abstraction in that microservice, but now you have the abstraction over the whole stack. So you can say boop, 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 boop. Oh, it goes down to the
right
bad,
there, right? Cascading impacts.
Hard drive that's not spitting out data as fast as
or that API 6 levels down. So yeah. Great stuff, John. Anything else you want to cover? I appreciate your time today.
No, I think I got it.
All right, great. Thanks, John.
All right. Thanks a lot, Ken.